Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit. With the nature of things, where we are realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. Please follow us on Facebook, on this Facebook page, or check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic -ROAR. Now, if you'd like to take part in the narrative, simply post your comments and we'll be happy to address them when relevant to our discussion. And you can help us be a voice here locally by liking and sharing this program. Please note that we're going to be expanding our live stream to other venues very, very soon. So in the American view of the Constitution course, we address the issue of faith, the faith of our founding fathers. And of the 55 delegates to the Constitutional Convention, it's alleged that 3 were deists. However, there's no evidence to corroborate that. See, a deist is someone who believes that God created the world, but has no interactions with it. So deists would have no reason to pray or expect God to interfere with world affairs. And the most well-known of these delegates was Benjamin Franklin. And the problem with calling him a deist is that, well, he regularly both called the delegates to prayer and acknowledged the hand of God in the events of our war for independence. Clearly not the actions of a deist. So although most of our founding fathers were genuine believers in the Christian faith, even those who may not have been regular attenders to church believed in the values of Christian faith and how they provided for the security needed for our freedom. Hence, natural law was a far better bridge from God to government in that it codified the Judeo-Christian value system without involving denominational distinctions. So if there are any of you out there that are interested in taking the IOTC's course, The American View of the Constitution, let me know in the comments or private message me. I hope to start something in late August if there's enough interest. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Mike Levine to the broadcast. Mike, how you doing?
No, I'm doing great, Chuck. Thanks for having me on today.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we just finished a 3-part series featuring Claremont City Councilman Todd Howard, and we discussed a treasure trove of information. I was just wondering if anything in particular stood out to you about that in regard to that interview.
You know, Chuck, there were a couple of things that were really interesting to me. And the first thing that when we invited Todd to come on, I thought it was really important that he explained to the audience the difference between keeping the millage rate the same and achieving what is known as the rollback rate, which means that the actual taxpayer's tax bill doesn't change. So, for example, Todd celebrates the point that the city of Claremont kept the millage rate the same. But the truth is that when property values rise, the taxable value of the property rises, even though the millage rate stays the same, the taxpayer pays more money. And then Todd explained to us the difference between keeping the millage rate flat and the rollback rate. And the good news is that Todd agrees with me that the rollback rate would be our ultimate objective. And then he was disappointed to a degree. He was celebrating the point that the millage rate stayed the same, which is a victory. And just so you know, the city council in Claremont has reduced the millage rate from previous administrations significantly. So that is a win for sure. And I was reassured because he was disappointed that the council was not able to achieve the rollback rate. So that's a big deal. And I really love Todd Howard. He's a great guy. He's so open, very knowledgeable about everything, very willing to discuss all of the issues in a very unfiltered way. And I really like that. So the point about the taxes, Chuck, I'll give this to you in a second, was a good deal. And then, of course, we got into some of the publicly held land and land uses and stuff like that. And we can talk about that more if you'd like to, Chuck.
Sure, sure. I as well was pretty impressed with the way Todd conducted himself. Was very, as you said, open and unfiltered. We got a lot of very interesting information. We brought up some uncomfortable topics actually, and he did well with them. You know, we talked about the Claremont Performing Arts Center and the boathouse, issues that some people are happy and not happy about. I think you might have been concerned about those issues, if I recall.
You know, Chuck, for me personally, as I've looked at government over the years, you know, when government makes a mistake, a singular mistake, that's one thing. But when you have compounded stupidity, that becomes really problematic. And when you know, cities are dealing with other people's money. So it's easy to spend money when it's not your money, whether you're a city council, county commissioner, whatever, you know, whatever legislative or administrative branch you serve on, it's easy to spend other people's money. So, you know, a singular mistake is not that big of a deal. But when government repeatedly gets involved in businesses that don't cash flow, and you know, that's a problem. I mean, that all of those negative cash flows flow back through to the taxpayer, costing more money to live in the city or county or state. And of course, all the money that goes into the government takes money out of the economy. So that's really overtaxation is a drag on the economy, and the economy is what delivers household incomes for families, Chuck.
Yeah. I agree with that. A couple other issues that he brought up was this new firehouse that the fire station, they kind of decided that they weren't going to build a new one, and they rehabbed the old one and saved about $15 million. I thought that was a very, very wise thing and an excellent accomplishment for the community.
Yeah, that's just a great reason to love Todd Howard. And again, another really nice thing about Todd Howard is that he also gave Rick Van Wagner, the acting city manager, credit for perusing through the budget and the operating statements and figuring and discovering that opportunity. So that's another really good thing about Todd Howard. You know, he's not a glory hound. He's not self-serving. He truly is a public servant. It's actually, I'm sure it cost him money to serve. He's an independent business owner. And again, you know, he served on the school board in the past, and again, did really good things for the school board. And really, you know, Todd is just a classic example of a citizen legislator, Chuck.
There you go. And then beyond that, Mike, he actually mentioned that he would love to serve one more term and then return to the private sector. I think that I commend any politician who's willing to serve and get out.
I agree with that. And, you know, Chuck, just this kind of rolls into the conversation about term limits and stuff, right? Because for me, as you're saying that, I fully understand what you're saying. And your remarks tug on my heartstrings because I know how hard it is to replace a Todd Howard. You know, so, you know, that's kind of if you wanted to make a negative argument about term limits, which I don't, that would be an argument that when you have a great person in there. But, you know, the obligation, too, of a true public servant is to train up, you know, your replacements, and then you can get into that whole political conversation, Chuck.
Right. Yeah, so we're probably not going to solve that issue, but I just...
Not today.
But I did want to kind of touch base on that because I thought it was a very powerful meeting with him, and thought it might be a good idea to re-highlight all that. And hopefully those who may not have seen those or missed one of them would check back on Facebook or YouTube. YouTube would be at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Plenty of Restoring Our American Republics out there. So throwing the ROAR will help with the search if you haven't looked for us in the past. Well, something else that's kind of interesting in the news these days is alligator Alcatraz. Any opening comments on that, or would you like me to throw a couple of facts out and start chewing on it?
I'll tell you what, Chuck, I'm going to let you throw out a few facts. I mean, of course, I'm chomping at the bit here. No pun intended, right? But let's go ahead and let's do a little education before we drill down into the rhetoric, okay?
Okay, well, I think it was Kristi Noem who said something along the lines of 21 million illegal aliens have entered the country, and trying to get them out is going to take an awful lot of space as we catch these people. But, I was a little bit confused as to how the facility actually came about, because if you recall back with the Trump Act that I guess kind of got pushed aside, they were getting ready to build this huge prison to, house these immigrants like forever. I thought that kind of got blown out, and then all of a sudden this alligator Alcatraz in 8 days shows itself. Do you have any thoughts on, what exactly happened there or who was involved?
Chuck, I could talk about this forever, but I already said it. It's so easy to spend other people's money.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm going to dive into it, huh, Chuck? You think? Yeah?
Yeah, well, you can.
Okay, look, it's too late. I'm going.
Okay, go for it.
The politics on this is so deep. It's commonly known to most political observers that Ron DeSantis, across the term of his governorship, has run the state of Florida with an iron hand. And effectively, I think, and listen, I've interviewed with special interests across the state of Florida, and everybody who follows this closely agrees that in the Florida legislature, there is no dissent. You either follow along with leadership, which is defined as the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, typically with a Republican House and with a Republican legislature and a Republican executive branch, which includes the cabinet. They're in lockstep, and that's how it pretty much was up until the 2025 legislative session. Ron DeSantis laid out what he wanted. The Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate accommodated him, and anybody in the House or Senate who had other ideas were quickly silenced and harshly, I'm going to use the word, I guess the only word I can think of is retaliated against until they fell in line and submitted to power. And that's how politics is done in the state of Florida, particularly. And, other governors have been very heavy-handed also, so it's not, specifically identified with DeSantis, but it's well known that DeSantis has an iron hand over the legislature and everything that goes on in the state of Florida under his leadership. But after his presidential campaign failed, the legislature took a little bit of a look at it, and they said, you know what, we're going to push back against some of the stuff that DeSantis required us to do that we didn't want to do in previous sessions under his leadership. So when Trump got elected and was sworn into office on January 20th, actually early in January, I think around January 7th, Governor DeSantis called for a special session to fast track the deportation of illegal immigrants in the state of Florida, which all of MAGA, like myself and you, Chuck, agree with. So DeSantis and Mike Caruso from the Palm Beaches, Representative Mike Caruso, presented 10 bills on behalf of DeSantis that were excellent, in my opinion. I read them all, I compared. But it's interesting because, of course, because DeSantis challenged Trump in the primary, DeSantis did not have a great relationship with Trump in January. But other legislative leaders do have a great relationship with Trump. Like, for example, Senator Joe Gruters has a great relationship with Donald Trump. So the legislature proposed its version of immigration enforcement here in the state of Florida that was very different from Ron DeSantis's version. But the interesting thing, Chuck, is that DeSantis's immigration programs are extraordinarily more effective than what the legislature proposed. And you can get into, we could talk about the characteristics of the Speaker of the House, Danny Perez, and the President of the Senate, Ben Albritton. But the truth of the matter is that according to MAGA supporters, were overwhelmingly more in favor of DeSantis's Secure Florida Act than they were the Trump Act. So that was a really interesting twist or spin. And I realized that what I just laid out for you is a long lead up to the conversation about alligator Alcatraz. So let me get you back involved here, Chuck, and we can dip into that a little bit more specifically. Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure. The specifics? Well, I guess there's 3,000 beds,
Okay, well, let me just jump in here real quick, if you don't mind, Chuck. So yeah, I mean, these guys, the legislature wanted to build, tens of millions of dollars facility, and this is a good thing about DeSantis. Amazing thing about DeSantis is he's pretty, and of course he's got a great team around him too. So I don't credit him necessarily as being the brainchild for alligator Alcatraz. I think Attorney General Uthmeier actually had the idea, but there was a vacant airstrip down in the Everglades, and that thing was all paved and ready to go. So it's so easy to throw up those temporary housing units on that concrete slab and then build that out. They did it in 8 days, okay? And of course, as you're pointing out, that it has the capacity to house 3,000 residents, let's say, until that's really a bad word. I regret choosing it. But 3,000 people can be housed there as they're being fast-tracked and processed out of the country. But the really spectacular piece of the puzzle is, and this was reflected in DeSantis's Secure Florida Act also, Chuck, is because DeSantis, in his Secure Florida Act, really focused on self-deportation. So as these illegal immigrants are being processed through alligator Alcatraz on day one, and as they're being processed in, they're offered the opportunity for self-deportation. And self-deportation is the fastest, most effective, and most efficient method for removing illegals out of the state of Florida, Chuck.
Sure. It is awesome. Check the box. You want to hang out here in prison for a little while, or would you like the next plane out back home?
As we make it really difficult for you.
That's right.
Or, and of course, I want to say something else too, Chuck, and that Kristi Noem, our Health and Human Services Director, that's wrong, our Homeland Security Director, also said that, the Trump administration has utilized its influence over other countries, and those countries are actually implementing public policy in their country that helps these people repatriate into their home country, Chuck, and that's a huge thing.
That's awesome. Yeah. They're just begging these people.
So call it a win. You get out of our country, you go back home to your country, you can help build your country, and your country makes the transition as painless as possible. That's exactly what should be happening. And then again, you can also, Chuck, identify the relationship, the positive interaction between state and federal government, which is very refreshing.
Absolutely, absolutely. In the interview that I was watching, President Trump actually kind of talked about his quote unquote rocky relationship with Governor DeSantis, and but he said basically he says everything's okay right about now, and we'll have issues in the past, in the future I'm sure, but things are looking good right now. So President Trump feels a little comfortable with our DGov.
Well, let me tell you something, Chuck, and I haven't mentioned this to you before, but it is true because, and I think if anybody watched the press conference that happened down at Alligator Alcatraz, I think as my friend Steve Bannon would say, the buried lead is that Danny Perez, the Speaker of the House, was in the audience but refused to sit at the table with Donald Trump, Kristi Noem, and Ron DeSantis. Chuck, comment on that.
Yeah, comment on that.
You hear what I just said to you?
Well, actually, I did, Mike. So, are you basically saying that Perez is not a Trump fan? Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm saying that Perez does not want to deport these illegals. Period. He doesn't want to be seen on camera with the President of the United States, the Director of Homeland Security, and the Governor of the state of Florida, who, in fact, is the most cooperative governor in the United States as it relates to deporting illegals, partnering with the federal government. And Danny Perez was in the audience, stood up and took a quick bow, and Donald Trump mentioned it. If you watch closely, Donald Trump says, "Oh, so you don't want to sit up here with us? Very interesting." So I got news for you. If Donald Trump could decide today the future of Danny Perez's political career, I would say Danny Perez's political career would be over, Chuck.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Yeah, I missed a little interaction there, but appreciate you bringing that up.
Very significant, Chuck.
Yeah. Another thing that Ron DeSantis actually said was that Trump's election has actually given, he used the word us, I think, governors maybe, the opportunity to fix immigration. So Ron DeSantis is definitely crediting President Trump for even the possibility of dealing with this whole immigration issue altogether.
Okay. Chuck, I'm just going to tell you, I think, obviously Ron DeSantis is a very popular governor and he wants to remain a popular governor. But I'm just going to throw this out for a tease, Chuck, as we talked about before coming on, that he also vetoed House Bill 1445, which prevents government employees from raising money, political campaign from political donors, while they're on government time, which I believe is illegal in Florida now. Okay, so that is, and DeSantis, even though it went through the legislature with only one dissenting vote, DeSantis vetoed it. So this is the point, Chuck. DeSantis understands, which Danny Perez doesn't really understand, how important his relationship with Donald Trump is. So, and of course, you also have the overlooming fact that his wife, Casey DeSantis, is strongly considering running for governor. And we also know that President Trump has endorsed Byron Donalds, who also had a seat at the table at the Alligator Alcatraz press conference and received the cold shoulder from DeSantis and his past chief of staff, Uthmeier, who is now his attorney general. So the rub between Trump and DeSantis is going to be who the next governor of the state of Florida will be. So that kind of all played out. And then, of course, you have the Real America's Voice correspondent, Brian Glenn, who is very favored by Trump. He has a lot of access to Trump. And I think it was Glenn, but maybe not. Somebody just brought up, to Trump. They asked Trump, what is the relationship between you and Governor DeSantis? And of course, Trump is grateful to DeSantis for the Alligator Alcatraz program. So he wants to glorify Governor DeSantis because he deserves it. And so does Attorney General Uthmeier as well. So Trump wants to go down there and celebrate. And of course, the Alligator Alcatraz is great for the Trump administration, great for the Department of Homeland Security. So this is a celebratory press conference. But he also understands that his candidate for the governor of the state of Florida may have to square off against Casey DeSantis for governor. And he did reserve the right to disagree with Governor DeSantis in the future, Chuck.
Right. Right. So also, one of the last things we kind of wanted to talk about, one of our guests, earlier guest, Kat Stanzel of Substack's Cat's Meow, put something up on solar power. He said, I'll quote it, the 10-year site plans of Florida regulated utilities are projecting that approximately 91% of new capacity additions will be solar and battery storage. So Kat is basically telling us that the state of Florida is going full tilt into solar power, and that could cause, first of all, our electric bills to skyrocket. I know my electric bill is going crazy right now, but I think you had something interesting to say about the amount of land needed to do something like this. Thought you might want to finish up our next few minutes here with a little issue on this. I don't know, maybe we can talk about it next week or whatever too, but we got about 3 minutes, Mike.
Thank you, Chuck. Well, there's nothing good about green energy as it is being proposed in the state of Florida today. Not a single good thing about it. It's unreliable. It's expensive, but let me start off by saying, if you really want to get the lowdown on energy, you have to follow Dave Walsh. And Dave Walsh is probably the best way to follow him is on X. I don't have his handle. I follow him on X, but I don't remember his handle off the top of my head. It's Dave Walsh, maybe, at, x.com, at Dave Walsh. I'm sure you'd find it if you search it up that way. But Dave Walsh really is the master of it should be, I would love to see Dave Walsh be the Secretary of Energy, because he was the head of energy development for Mitsubishi for a long time, and he built nuclear power plants all around the world, and he truly is the expert. And we have the honor of having Dave Walsh living in Orlando. And I will just throw out to my friends at the Florida Republican Assembly as well that Dave Walsh is very actively involved with the Florida Republican Assembly, and Kat, and who I love, and others are actually taking their talking points off of a white paper that was written by Dave Walsh and distributed by the Florida Republican Assembly. So Dave Walsh is the underpinning of the whole thing, and he points out that whether it's wind or solar, it is like 9 times more expensive if it's wind or maybe solar, and about 4 times more expensive if it's wind. And then it doesn't produce power all the time. It only produces power when the wind's blowing or the sun's out, which is only a small fraction of the day. And it's very expensive, as I just pointed out. And then, as you alluded to, Chuck, the kicker on the whole thing is that in order to put the solar program in place that the state of Florida is fast tracking towards, we need 192,000 acres dedicated to solar panels, or We can take Dave Walsh's approach and do the whole job on 66 acres, Chuck. So I just gave you several reasons why Governor DeSantis should absolutely roadblock what's been going down on energy in the state of Florida since he's been the governor, Chuck.
Yeah.
And of course, that's just all about campaign contributions. So while Governor DeSantis just vetoed Bill 1445, which prevents his employees from raising money for him on the clock, he also is fast-tracking ineffective, inefficient, land-gobbling energy policy in the state in exchange for political contributions. And I got to tell you, Chuck, it makes it really hard to swallow for the average Floridian who's just trying to live in this state and pay their bills, Chuck.
Yeah, I get it, Mike. We really do have a love-hate relationship with this guy, and we're hoping that if he really does have presidential aspirations, he might pay a little bit more attention to some of these issues. But we are out of time, believe it or not, and we hopefully will we're hoping that we live stream both to Facebook and YouTube today. It's our first attempt at doing that, so hopefully we'll determine whether or not we actually won out on that game. But any final comments before I sign off, Mike?
I think that covers it, Chuck. I guess we're going to have to do another episode or two because there is more to say, obviously.
Oh, there certainly is. There certainly is. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you again for tuning in to our twice weekly live stream. See you next time. And meanwhile, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.